I'm in the waiting room at a crowded emergency room because I'm having a heart issue. And I am pissed because this just doesn't make sense. Now, earlier I'd been at the urgent care, and I went to urgent care because I ate something that felt like it got stuck in my throat. And it felt like my esophagus was irritated. So I went to urgent care, and the provider listened to me, and then she said, I think you should have an EKG. I didn't agree, but I humored her and let her do one. And she comes back, and she's got the printout of the EKG, and she hands it to me, and she says, you're having a heart issue. You need to get to the hospital immediately. I've called an ambulance. And I'm thinking, no, this isn't right. Now, I didn't have to go in the ambulance because my fiance was with me, and she drove down to the hospital, about a 10-minute drive. And while she's driving, I'm looking at this printout of the EKG as if I could make sense of it, and I can't. There's little squiggles over there, but there is one thing that I recognize. In the upper right-hand corner, it says abnormal. Now, here's a tip. If you want to get to the front of the line at a crowded emergency room, walk in with a printout of an EKG that says abnormal on it. Because I waited about a minute, and then they brought me to a back room, hooked me up to an EKG, and when those results are in, they took me to another room, and they hooked me up to another EKG. And a fun fact about EKGs, every time they give you one, they put on new adhesive pads, and they tear off the old ones. So after that latest EKG, all of a sudden the room is just crowded with people. There's someone putting in an IV, there's someone taking blood, there's someone taking my clothes and putting them into a bag, and while they're doing this, they're asking me a lot of questions. They say, do you have a history of heart disease? I say, no. Are you diabetic? No. Do you have any medications that you're on? I say, no. Everything they ask, I say no to, because none of this is making any sense to me. And then after they ask those questions, they start saying, okay, tell us about the food that got stuck in your throat. And I tell them the same story about the food getting stuck in my throat, but sometimes it's hard to hear because the heart rate monitor that I'm attached to, it keeps going off with the low heart rate alarm. And my heart rate is low because I run 5 days a week. It doesn't make sense. And then the cardiologist walks in, and the first thing I see is his fanny pack. Now, he's got it like over here on his shoulder like a bandolier, but I know what it is. And I find it really distracting for some reason. So he's got the EKG, and he says to me, I don't think you're having an active heart issue right now. I think you had one once. And I say, what the hell are you talking about? He says, well, it could have been a day ago, a week ago, a month ago. Sometimes people, they have heart issues and they never even know it. That's why it's called a silent killer. And I know in my head that he's wrong, because I've seen it on TV and in the movies. When someone is having an active heart issue, they clutch their chest, they cry out to God, or in Fred Sanford's situation, to his wife Elizabeth. This is the big one. But I'm sitting on a bed, and it feels like I got really bad heartburn, and if I burped a couple times, I would be okay. And then the doctor says, but you might have a blockage. So what we're going to do is we're going to run some more tests. So what I want you to do is just relax. So then everybody leaves the room, and I'm left to kind of contemplate what's going on. And I look at the clock, and I confirm what I'd already suspected. I have missed Jeopardy. But I know that if I get home in time, I can get a decent night's sleep, and I can get up, and I can go for a run, and then I can go to work, and I can teach Hamlet. Because more than anything else right now, that's what I want to do. I want to do my routine. And then after I've relaxed for a couple of hours, Dr. Bandolier comes back into the room. And this time he's wearing one of those OR hairnets, and he's wearing the OR booties in addition to the fanny pack. And he says, you're having an active heart issue. Your troponin levels were too high. You have a STEMI. We need to take you to the cath lab and probably put in a stent. It's going to take 1 or 2 hours. There are some risks. What do you want to do? My mind goes blank. I didn't even hear half of what he said. I don't know what to do. And that's when he leans in and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, you need to do this. You're having a heart attack. And that's the first time anybody had used that phrase, and it's terrifying. They took me up there and they found that I had a 100% blockage in one of the major arteries in my heart. And later on I thought, well, they're all pretty major arteries, aren't they? 3 days after that, it's January 28th, 2023, and it's time for me to go home. And I wake up in this hotel room, this hospital room, and I notice that the sun has come out for the first time in a few days. So I use that fancy remote they give you, the one that controls the nurse and the TV and the lights, and I raise the shade to let in the sun. And for the first time, there are no machines beeping, there's no TV on, and my chest, my heart doesn't hurt. And I just enjoy a moment of calm. And then the resident walks in, and she smiles at me because she knows I'm going home. And she gives me discharge instructions, and then she listens to my questions, and then I realize I have a new sensation in my chest, and that's that I'm crying. And I'm not a crier, but everything has just been so overwhelming. I went to the emergency room because I was having a heart attack. And I'm still a little bit pissed, but I'm also grateful. And I know it'll never make sense to me, but that doesn't really matter right now. Because the only thing that matters right now is that I'm still here. And I am. Thank you.